Now, last year, the BBC ran something called Great Britain's, and I made the case for Isambard Kingdom Brunel. He would have won, but unfortunately, at the last moment, a flock of fools, frankly, rang up and voted for the drunken Kurd murderer. Still, it gave us an idea. Why not try and find the greatest car ever? So, over the next few weeks, various guest presenters are going to come along and argue the case for their contender, and then you, at home, can vote. It was going to be a top 10, since there are 10 programmes in the series, but due to the unique way the BBC is funded, it's actually a top 9. This week, that's about to change, because it's my turn. In the 60s, many new sounds came to the world. There was the wail of the protest song.
John is in the basement, mixing up the medicine. I'm on the pavement, thinking about the government.
The beep from an orbiting satellite. The whoomp of a Huey helicopter. And best of all, this. The bellow of a V8 Ford Mustang. Some of you have seen the film Bullet with the epic car chase around San Francisco. It's probably the best car chase in any film. What made it stand out for me is that unlike any other car chase, there was no music to enhance the action. Apparently, the director heard the noise that these engines make and thought, that'll do. This, then, is the image we all have of the Mustang. A muscle car, a metal metaphor for America. Unbridled power with a dodgy sense of geography. And yet the Mustang is rather more than a ton of brute force and ignorance. In the 1950s, cars were for your dad. Didn't matter whether they were large, small, sporty, cheap, green, whatever. They were designed by someone else's father for your father. Ford, however, had noticed something strange. In 1957, they'd seen a new word appear in the dictionary for the very first time. Teenager. In 1960, they saw the pill come along, and in 1961, they saw a spring chicken get voted into the White House. In essence, Ford saw the baby boom coming. Way ahead of time, Ford realized that America was getting younger and cleverer and richer. So, as the baby boomers actually turned 18 in 1964, they were ready for the party. I'm picking up good vibrations. The Beach Boys brought the music. The Mexicans brought the smoking materials. Mary Quant brought the clothes. And Ford brought the car. This was the genesis of modern car design. Yes, it was for your father, but with its 4 seats, it was also for your mother. And with a price tag of just $2,300, it was for your sister too. There was even a version for your delinquent drag racing brother. You didn't even have to buy one. You could pop into your local branch of Hertz, and for $17 a day and 7 cents a mile, you could rent one and take it racing. These cars became the fabled rent-a-racers, the 350H. Those were the days. This was also the first car ever to be offered with what you and I would recognise as an options list. It was designed to be designed by you. So you could have a hardtop, a coupe, or a convertible like this. You could have a 6-cylinder engine, or for just $400 more, a thumping great V8. You had a choice of seats, dashboards, gearboxes, wheels, tyres, suspension, differentials. everything.
She's a root-toot-tootin', big six-shootin', sweet six-cylinder Mustang.
Why don't you come in and see what a terrific deal your Ford dealer will give you on a new Mustang? It's got all kinds, all colors, all options. Pick out any one you like, all except this one. This one's mine.
Sweet six-cylinder Mustang.
The effect was astonishing. Ford thought they might sell 100,000 in the first year, but by the end of 1965, they'd actually sold 680,000. And even though it was only for sale in one market, they only sold it in North America, it was the fastest-selling car of all time, a record that's never been beaten. It was featured on the cover of Time and Newsweek. There were riots outside dealerships as people clamoured to get one. No car before or since has ever created such a stir. Over the years, Ford has built a reputation for making supercars with supermarket price tags. And the foundation for that reputation is the Mustang. It has such an enduring appeal that it lives on even today among the Evos and the VTECs in the trick, electronic world of the PlayStation garage. So, greatest car ever? Well, it changed the world, mobilised a generation, redirected the way we thought about cars, and sounded like God shouting. So I should say so, yeah. This week, however, it's the turn of our own Richard Hammond to explain why he thinks the greatest car ever is the Land Rover.
There are no fins and no spoilers. It doesn't swoop, curve, or look like it's going fast when it's parked. It never looks like it's going fast. It doesn't go fast. It doesn't cosset you behind with the skin of a rare animal. It doesn't cool your face with a soft breeze issued from a walnut dash. Its wheels are not magnesium. But I'm not asking you to go out and buy one or to put a poster of one on your wall. We're talking about great cars. And that's not the same thing as desirable cars. Mother Teresa was great. Well, did you see it? So let's get down to the greatness of the Land Rover. For starters, it is totally and utterly classless. It tells the world nothing about your wallet, your aspirations, your success, or your abilities in the bedroom. In a Land Rover, you can work the land or you can own the land. Drafty old collie carrier it may be, but kings, prime ministers, toffs, shepherds and solicitors can all climb out of a Land Rover and look proper. The Series 1 Land Rover was launched in 1948 with permanent four-wheel drive and the capacity to work as a car, a tractor, a generator, a welder and a fire pump. Its body was hand-built using aluminium left over from the war effort. Its light green paint was a hand-me-down from fighter plane builders. But they got it right. Its separate chassis and bolt-on body construction is still used in today's Defender. It wasn't broke, so they never fixed it. Even after 55 years of production and 1.8 million cars. And people appreciated it, so they kept them going. Incredibly, 70% of all the Land Rovers built are still on the go today. 70%. Compare that to the VW Beetle. Over 27 million were built. Can you imagine 70% of them still cluttering up the roads today? Their time has gone. The Beetle did nothing except exist in large numbers, but the Land Rover was a groundbreaker. Along the way, it spawned the Range Rover, and in doing so created a whole new type of car, the sports utility vehicle. So it's classless, it's clever, it's virtually indestructible, and it's got some pretty impressive offspring. But here's the nub of it. The reason why this is a great car, the great car. Land Rovers only do important things. It's part of the fabric of life in town and country, and probably every day of your life, you've either seen or been near one. It's taken pregnant mothers through snowstorms to hospital, carried rescuers up remote mountains, and supported the livelihoods of millions of families. Whilst others pose, preen and cruise, the Land Rover has contributed directly to all of our lives through peacetime and war. It's crossed deserts to deliver food to starving people, explored inaccessible territories to help map the world, built telecommunications networks, brought law and order to hostile places, and helped preserve the rarest of animals from extinction. It's been claimed that the first car seen by 60% of the developing world's population is a Land Rover. I defy you to find one way in which it fails to measure up, to be what it's supposed to be and to do what it's supposed to do. And it's beautiful, truly beautiful, in the way that the weather-beaten, careworn face of a desert nomad might be beautiful. It needs a knighthood and a statue. But I tell you, whatever happens, if it's heaped with glory or ignored, it'll make no difference. A Land Rover would never turn up to collect an Oscar. It'd be far too busy doing something important somewhere for someone.
If the Arts Council were to open a gallery of automotive innovation, it might look something like this. We've got the Mercedes S-Class and the Range Rover with their fluid suspension systems, the smart car with its semi-automatic gearbox, and the A-Class whose engine slides under the floor in a crash, the Audi A8 with its space frame construction and headlights that swivel as you steer. Imagine if all this marvellous technology could come together in one car.
Well, it did, 50 years ago, in this.
The superb Citroën DS. Easily the greatest car in the world.
There have been other groundbreaking cars. The Model T was mass-produced. The Fiat 500 was a packaging miracle. But they changed only one thing at a time. The DS changed everything. Construction, materials, control systems, gizmos, safety, driving, being a passenger, the lot. It was a true revolution in motoring. And it wasn't just an engineering benchmark. The DS changed the way cars look forever. When the wraps came off at the 55 Paris Motor Show, every other car suddenly looked redundant. They were cautious designs, still tainted with post-war austerity. But by contrast, on the first day alone, Citroën sold 12,000 DSs.
The DS was welcomed like Ingrid Bergman on a building site. And that's not such a fatuous analogy, actually, because what we call the DS is, in France, pronounced déesse. Déesse. It's the French word for goddess.
It is a thing of beauty, but it's a French sort of beauty. It's not the sort that would make you wave your arms around as a new Ferrari might. It's the sort that you look at and then go away and discuss over a cup of coffee, maybe all day. The stylist Flaminio Bertoni was also a sculptor. He wanted to create a work of art, but the engineer André Lefebvre had a background in the aeroplane industry, and he wanted an aerodynamically perfect shape, the nearest thing possible to the ideal teardrop with a tapered rear. Well, we got both.
So, let's get into the guts of this car's greatness. Where do I start? It was built to within tolerances of microns. It used aluminium and plastic for some of its body panels. It was the first car with a plastic dashboard and the first with disc brakes. It blazed a trail in safety too, crumple zones, rollover protection, a collapsible steering wheel. The engine was even designed to be pushed under the car in a crash. And eventually it would have headlights that swiveled with the front wheels. I mean, what else do you want? Cup holder?
Oh, bam. Ba-ba-dee-ba-da-be-dum-bum.
At the heart of the DS is a hydraulic system called a hydro-pneumatic. Now, there are no springs in the suspension. Instead, there are these balls of nitrogen gas. I'm sure you know that a gas under compression becomes progressively stiffer. So what this car has is a variable rate suspension system. You thought that was new. It kept the tyres in contact with the surface, even on those really choppy French back roads. You could set it to various heights, and it was automatically self-levelling. You could even keep driving if some would-be assassin blew one of the back wheels off, as President de Gaulle discovered. It also made this boulevard cruiser something of a tour de force in tough desert rallies. But what really amazed people in 1955 was the quality of the ride. It is still absolutely phenomenal. It's sort of like going along on a bed of fluid. Actually, of course, it is going along on a bed of fluid. It was, and in my view remains, the greatest single leap forwards in car design since, well, the car. And what's really amazing is that any car that you drive today owes something, somewhere, to this, the goddess.
And here tonight to argue his case is former Formula One commentator, and boy, don't we miss him, Murray Walker.
The Ford Model T, the Beetle, the Mini. People say these are the greatest cars of all time because they sold in their millions to transport the masses.
But I say the opposite. I say the greatest car of all time is unique and exclusive, built without compromise and regardless of cost. It is the McLaren F1, the greatest road car ever. Wow, my God! Now, I've never driven a 627 horsepower motor car before, so I'm going to be mighty, mighty careful. But I can tell you that even in my pathetic way, that getaway felt sensational. But the great thing about this McLaren F1 is the central driving position, because it is literally like driving an enormously powered four-wheel motorbike. You feel that you can put it exactly where you want it to go. I'm going to stop talking because I'm going to concentrate on this chicane here. Right, left, wow, wow, up a gear. That was a nice gear change, Murray. I'm very pleased with that one. Second chicane here, on with the stoppers. Right, left, I'm going to give it some boot coming out.
The McLaren F1 still holds the world record for the fastest production car ever made, with a top speed of 240 miles an hour. And it can go from rest to 100 miles an hour and back to rest in 11.4 seconds. The cost? £634,500.
But numbers don't tell the whole story. The McLaren F1 is great because it's the passion and vision of one man. It's a perfect example of man and machine in harmony. And it's a machine that's the work of a genius.
Our total focus was on trying to design and build the best sports car in the world.
And the British Grand Prix is underway.
That genius is Gordon Murray, the lateral-thinking visionary behind World Championship winning cars for Brabham and McLaren.
Still leading in the white Brabham. Nelson Piquet in the Brabham Alfa Romeo.
The car should be the best quality, the best driver's car, and it should be not a racing car on the road, a car that you could, say, drive to the south of France. That was my direction.
You can see the obsessiveness of a Formula One design genius in the car's details. He set strict parameters for width and weight. He said there should be no driver aids, no power steering, no traction control, and he refused to give way on any of them. There are 20 metres of 22-carat gold foil in every car. The engine bay is lined with it for the best heat dispersion. Even the titanium toolkit is gold-plated. There's a fantastic driver's handbook, and it's got 2 pages devoted to telling you how to get into the driver's seat. And hear this. At the time of the launch, just the car's exhaust system cost more than a top-of-the-range BMW 7 Series. How much? 50,000 quid. Right, well now I'm with someone who really knows what he's doing in this McLaren F1. It's difficult to give you an idea of just what the performance of this car can be really like because you run out of superlatives. It will go from standstill to 200 miles an hour in 28 seconds. Unbelievable. And I can feel, I mean, my head goes right back when the power feeds in. It's an unbelievable experience. And all the time, of course, I am very much aware of the fact that that fabulous V12 627 horsepower BMW engine is doing the business behind me, and my goodness, it really does do the business. Wow!
Some might argue that the McLaren F1 is just another supercar. But although other supercars may be fast and beautiful, invariably the accountants have interfered with their development, and the result is always a compromise. None of them are purebreds from the ground up like this car. If you were to take one car and put it in a capsule, send it into space to show other civilizations the best we can do, this would be it. And that's why, for me, it's the greatest road car of all time.
Is he very much mistaken? I think he is. But if you want to vote for the McLaren F1 as the greatest road car ever, call 09001 990001. That is the hardest number ever to remember. 09001 990001. That's a binary number. This week, however, the star of Tomb Raider and Red Dwarf, Chris Barrie, is going to argue why he thinks the E-Type Jaguar is the greatest car ever.
The key to a great car is popularity. Not the most sold, but the most loved, the most revered. That's why there can only be one truly great car. I'm talking about something that makes you stare, something that thumps you in the gut and makes you change the way you feel about cars forever. I'm talking about the Jaguar E-Type. Looks-wise, everything is right about this car. From any angle, in any situation, there isn't a line out of place. To gain access to the great power plant, the whole front bodywork hinges forward on the subframe, and there you are, confronted by this, sculpture. And sculpture's the byword for just about everything on an E-Type. The twin exhaust pipes sweep from beneath with a promise of heavenly tones, while inside the driver is greeted by a brigade of toggle switches and dials set in aluminium. And of course, not just 2, but 3 windscreen wipers. I could look at these details all day. This is without doubt the most beautiful car ever made. That's not just my opinion, it's also the opinion of Enzo Ferrari. Now there's a man who made some stunning cars in his time, but as far as he was concerned, the E-Type dwarfed them all. And launched into a world of square-cut mumsy and dadsy sit-up-and-beg saloons back in 1961, it caused an absolute storm. It was instantly in demand. anyone who was anyone wanted to be seen in an E. Because this was the 1960s. The starchy, austere 50s were history, the 60s were sexy. And the E-Type was nothing but sexy. Two cars epitomised the cultural and social revolution of the time. This and the Mini. The Jag was cool from the outset. Hipsters chose to drive the Mini, whereas the Jag chose the hipsters. Legend has it that Frank Sinatra strolled into his local Jaguar showroom and was told there was a waiting list. Just because he couldn't have one there and then, he threw a strop. But the E-Type wasn't just a pretty face. It had proper competition breeding. The engine, the independent suspension, the disc brakes, all were very advanced for their time, and all were based on those of glorious Le Mans winning D-Type racing cars. That gave the E-Type something all great cars need: pedigree. That fantastic engine gave the E-Type something else: power. And as a mark of true greatness, it was power for the people. When the E-Type was launched, it offered 150 miles an hour for just £2,100. Now, to put that in perspective, to get equivalent performance at the time, you had to buy either an Aston Martin or a Ferrari at more than twice the cost. My first trip in an E-Type was in the mid-60s at the age of 5. The car belonged to one Captain Dickie Pratt, a friend of my father's. The next 30 minutes were to provide me with an unforgettable experience. The sound, the smell, the view over that endless bonnet, and the speedo needle dancing wildly somewhere beyond the 100 mark. My fire was well and truly lit. 20 years later, I took a test drive in an early roadster, and although I couldn't really afford it at the time, I just had to have it. The 1960s were a landmark in history. And the E-Type is the only car that truly captures the excitement and liberation of that time. And, this is important, it's the first true pin-up car. Long before the likes of the Countach and Testarossa, this was the car that kids were pinning up on their bedroom walls. It's entirely an emotional thing, not a rational thing, and that's also key to the Jag's greatness. Because cars should be emotional. If they're judged purely on rational, technical terms, they simply become another mode of transport. And cars aren't that. They're glorious living things. And the E-Type Jaguar is the standard bearer. Everything that we love about cars comes together in this machine. Let me ask you, did you ever meet anyone who didn't like an E-Type?
And this week, we're handing the baton over to a man who criticises restaurants in the Sunday Times, A.A. Gill.
The greatest car in the world is not the most expensive. It's not the fastest. The greatest car in the world isn't the most technologically advanced. It's the car we ask for by name. Taxi! Cars evolve. They started off as horseless carriages and ended up here. But evolution is all about survival of the fittest. And in those terms, a Lamborghini is a small, quaking lemming. Your F1 is a poster. This is where cars belong, in the city. It's not about driving in the Algarve down hairpin bends or the long and winding road. This is where cars really make the difference. The beauty of the cab is in its character, its form-following function. It works incredibly hard. It does nearly 5,000 trips a year, and it goes about 50,000 miles. The interior of a London cab is just perfect. You couldn't improve it. It has plenty of leg room, it has lights you can read with, and you're cut off from the boring drone of the driver. The cab is a uniquely brilliant bit of British engineering. It's the sort of the Concorde of the road. I mean, slower, of course, but with more leg room. The Morris dancing of motoring. the famous turning circle, was laid down in 1906. The cab's got to be able to turn around in 24 feet. President Khrushchev had a cab. Sumo wrestlers are given cabs as marks of respect. Stephen Fry drives a cab. And we're told so does Prince Philip. A cab was the first four-wheeled vehicle ever to set foot at the North Pole. Absolutely the best thing about the cab is its state-of-the-art navigation system. It comes as standard with every one, and it's him, and he's just perfect. Cab drivers' brains are measurably larger than the rest of us, although you probably wouldn't know to talk to them. But down here, in the hippocampus, is where they store the knowledge, or the nodge, leaving enough space up here for hanging, football, and the answer to every general knowledge quiz ever posed. In that brain, there are over 1 million routes stored. He can take us to any one of 25,000 streets within a 6-mile radius of Charing Cross. OK, cabby, I want to go from Waterloo to the Palace Theatre.
All you do, you leave Waterloo by the spur road at the back, turn left into Bayliss Road, left into Waterloo Road. You never guess who I had in the back of the cab last week. Forward into Tennyson Way, forward onto Waterloo Bridge, bear right into the Aldwych, and another stupid tourist looking the wrong way, left into Catherine Street, left into Exeter Street, right into Burley Street. Chinatown's on the left. Want a bit of fried cat, that's the place to go. Sweet. Right into Southampton Street, left into Henrietta Street, right into Bedford Street, forward into Cranbourne Street, right into Charing Cross Road, Palace Theatre's on the left-hand side. That's 780, Gov, please.
Frankly, this car's never going to win on all the technical things that cars are usually judged by. It's about a romantic attachment. I love these old things. This isn't about being a driver, it's about being a passenger. It's about getting drunk, it's about picking up girls, and it's about having sex in the back, quite frankly. In the end, if the British were a car, they'd be a cab. We're good in tight corners. You don't want to go head-to-head with us. And like us, it's driven by a rather embarrassing genius. Let's face it, on a wet night in Soho, which would you rather see? A Ferrari or the yellow light of a cab?
What a strange man. The McLaren F1 has overtaken the E-Type Jaguar. This might have something to do with the fact I ran into Ron Dennis, who's the boss of McLaren, at a party last week, and he spent an inordinate amount of time on his mobile phone, 22%. This week, however, we're handing over the reins to a real-life rock god, Pink Floyd drummer Nick Mason.
Italy has given us Lamborghinis, Maseratis, and of course Ferraris. It has given us, in essence, the supercar. But its finest hour, the greatest car of all time, is much more humble. It lasted for almost 20 years. It found over 3 million owners. And most of all, it defined the small car. It is the Fiat 500.
The trouble with designing a small car is it's a bit like doing a Rubik's Cube. You get the blue surface right, and then you find that all the other faces are messed up. That it has to do absolutely everything that a big car does, but for a lot less money. So it has to be compact on the outside, and yet it has to be big on the inside. But the great thing about the Fiat 500 was it cracked this problem.
The Fiat 500 was born out of necessity. Post-war Italy of the 1950s was a country that needed to get on the move. Any car that did the job would have to be cheap. And Italian families were large, so it would have to fit all the bambinos in. Yet the 500's designer, the brilliant Dante Giacosa, decided that even though his car was built for pennies, its owners shouldn't have to suffer for the pleasure. car is clever, really clever. For example, the front suspension. It consists of just a single spring across the car rather than a pair. This isn't only cheaper, it's lighter as well. And that isn't some penny-pinching lash-up either. In fact, it's the technology that John Cooper used when he produced his brilliant post-war miniature racing cars. They say that there are 4 things that can go wrong with a Fiat 500. Mind you, there are only 4 things on a Fiat 500. Its simplicity is its brilliance. There's ingenious design all over this car. Take this canvas sunroof, for example. It's not only to let in a bit of fresh air, it also meant that Fiat didn't have to pay for an entire roof pressing, and that saved money and weight. And the interior light, built into the rear-view mirror to save space.
Neat, simple, and an idea copied and used in the 1990 Lotus Elan.
In fact, the packaging is genius. The 500 has one of the greatest interior to exterior proportions of any car. Remember, the 500 predated that other so-called miracle of packaging, the Mini, by 2 years. Like the Fiat, there are other cars that mobilized nations. America had the Model T Ford, for example. But that was just a box on wheels. It was big, but unlike the 500, it wasn't clever. But the 500 was a people's car and then some. It was a technical marvel that also had something else: charisma. Nearly every Italian driver thinks he's Nuvolari, and the others think they're Ascari. The 500 let them fantasize. It wasn't fast, but it certainly felt it. It was perfect for the twisting roads and cramped city streets of Italy. And it was stylish too. No car was so right for so many people so instantly.
There was no end to its uses. Over the life of the 500, Fiat came up with over 60 variants. You could have a sports car, you could have a convertible, a beach buggy, a commercial vehicle, or even an estate.
And if the original 15 brake horsepower was a bit leisurely, you could have more power too. The young Italian Romeo wanting to impress could drive his 500 into any backstreet garage in any Italian town and buy an assortment of bolt-on goodies including twin carbs, bigger exhausts and fatter wheels. This was the ultimate Meccano set. Such is the 500's intoxicating personality that even today it pulls in a diverse fan club. Gordon Murray, the designer of the McLaren F1, drives one to work. Tina Turner's got one. So has Michael Schumacher. And Peter Stringfellow. But that's not the car's fault.
The 500 isn't awesome or mind-blowing. It's actually much more important than that. It's a piece of genius. Every day, millions of people use small, clever cars. But this is the car that set the pace. This is the finest piece of intelligent car design ever. This is the car that showed how it should be done. That's why the Fiat 500 is the greatest car in the world.
Style, grace, and beauty. Even the Oxford Dictionary defines Rolls-Royce as a thing of quality. The Spirit of Ecstasy, sculpted in 1911, a crystallization of the greatest name in the world, Rolls-Royce. This is the last great Rolls-Royce made, the Silver Cloud. This long bonnet is my phallus extension, my shot of testosterone, my fallacy. Frederick Royce began it in 1904, and I'm now driving his heritage. The Rolls-Royce engineers were the very best. They never claimed to build the world's fastest cars, or the cars with the most high-tech built into them. But what they did was build cars like great architecture, built to last. It is believed that 75% of Rolls-Royces are still extant. When the Silver Cloud was launched in 1955, it was the pinnacle of engineering excellence. Rolls-Royce knew that their customers were blue bloods, aristocrats, masters of the universe, heads of state. Scrap metal dealers, bingo hall owners, jockeys, comedians, and lowlife were somewhat Jaguar folk. But the Cloud transcended the class divide. Its beauty and excellence entranced everybody. Doormen at posh hotels would fawn. Refuse collectors would doff their caps in admiration.
The engine, originally American, improved as always by Crew, still in use today, shoveling out something like over 400 brake horsepower. The steering box, not imported, they made their own. Technical perfection. This is your drawing room. Acres of walnut, 50 yards of leather piping, 3 cow hides, unblemished, aircon and extra at £577. You could buy a Morris Minor for that in those days. It took 3 months to build. Total cost £5,000. 12 coats of paint. A thing of beauty is a joy forever. But now, once upon a time, I did observe a technician going for a drive at Crewe, but he got in the boot with a stethoscope to test for obtrusive noises. What do you believe?
It existed at a time when the social orders of Britain remained rigid. The toffs toffed and the riff-raff lived in black and white. But as the 50s became the 60s, the great unwashed were on the march. Rolls-Royce could sniff the odour of social change quicker than you can say New Labour. The owner-driver was now in vogue, and the chauffeur in possession of his P45. Thus, in the Cloud, the fresh air and the air conditioning was directed at the driver's feet, and the backseat passengers could take care of themselves. Dukes, viscounts and lords were replaced by pop stars, comedians, bookies and Johnny-come-latelys. Class, style, dignity, honour disappeared in a cloud of new money. All this meant the Cloud was doomed. The mass-made Silver Shadow was born to placate a changed Britain. The Silver Cloud was, I declare, the last great Rolls-Royce ever made. Charles Stuart Rolls and Frederick Henry Royce can raise a flagon of nectar in the Elysian fields to its creation. And that alone makes it great.
But there's more. Take your modern toy. Leather, aircon, electric windows, sophistication we now take for granted. It's because of motorcars like the Cloud that we have these. Rolls-Royce proved that motoring could be luxurious, that the motorcar was more than a mechanical horse. It's their legacy, and we should be proud of it.
Rolls-Royce defines quality, breeding, style. And so, as the last proper car from this illustrious company, is not the Silver Cloud the greatest car in the world?
Just a minute, I'll get myself in position. Oh, it. And this week things get interesting because my dog had puppies, right? A couple of years ago, and I sold one of them to Nick Mason, who a couple of weeks ago championed the Fiat 500. And then that dog had puppies, and Nick's just sold one of those to Graham Lasso, the Chelsea footballer, who this week is championing the Audi Quattro. How spooky is that?
These are the people's champions, the high street supercars. The Lancia Delta Integrale, Subaru Impreza Turbo, the Mitsubishi Evo, and Ford Escort Cosworth, all brilliant. And none of them would exist if it weren't for one car. The Audi Quattro.
It was the daddy in every way.
Not only did it spawn these amazing children, but it revolutionised motorsport and changed the way we think about performance cars forever. In fact, it wasn't just the daddy, it was the godfather.
Until the 1970s, four-wheel drive in road cars was a pipe dream. But that all changed when a small band of a dozen or so Audi engineers started working unofficially after hours on cracking the nut of sending the power to all four wheels on a road car.
And they did it. Their four-wheel drive system was a work of genius. This is it, the genesis of the everyday supercar. Even by today's modern standards, it still handles absolutely brilliantly. The original Quattro was launched in 1980, would last for 10 years, and just over 11,000 were sold. Not a lot, but in that time, it laid down its marker for greatness. In rallying, it ripped up the rulebook. Before the Quattro, rallying was driven by two wheels. After the Quattro, it was four wheels good, two wheels forget it. The Quattro racked up World Championship titles in 1982, 1983 and 1984, and no rally car since has won a championship without turbo power and four-wheel drive. The greatness of the Quattro was that it made people realise that high performance was as much about going around corners as it was about travelling in a straight line.
It gave us the biggest single leap forward in sports car technology there has ever been.
So, not beautiful and not a big seller. Its legacy is all these. It also showed us that going fast wasn't just about a massive engine wrapped inside a pretty car. I'll shut up now and let the Audi speak for itself. This is the Quattro doing what it was born to do.
50, rechts minus innen, sofort aufgruppe, minus innen, sofort aufgruppe, rechts Gruppe, links minus, nachgruppe, plus innen, 80, 8,5 Gruppe, rechts minus eng, sofort mittel links, plus 60, rechts minus voll, 50, mittel voll, sofort 70, 8 mittel links, plus 40, mittel rechts, plus innen, 50, Aufgruppe, rechts voll, 50, mittel rechts, plus innen, 50, Gruppe voll, sofort links minus, Achtung, macht zu, nach innen, sofort mittel rechts, plus, 80 innen, sofort mittel links, plus innen, rechts minus, sofort links minus innen, Achtung, rechts minus innen, 70.
The Audi Quattro. Definitely the greatest car of all time.
Over the last 9 weeks, we have been showing you what we think are the 9 greatest cars ever made, but you, very kindly, have been voting for an absolute winner. And we have a result for the greatest car in the world.
We do indeed. After some heavy, late voting, the E-Type Jaguar was knocked out of third place by the Audi Quattro, everybody.
And in second place, not entirely surprising, the McLaren F1.
And so, the winner, the greatest car of all time, as voted by you, it'll make it for the bonsai tree. It's the Land Rover. Obviously, we needed to think of some kind of fitting tribute to mark this momentous occasion. And so, well, you know that plinth they've built in Trafalgar Square, which currently is empty. They're waiting to put a statue of someone on it. I don't know, Arthur Scargill or Joan Byers or someone, but whoever it'll be, we thought, since it's empty, gave us an idea. So there's the other plinth in Trafalgar Square, and yeah, here we come. Here are the production team. And there's Hammond, who championed the Land Rover with the model that he's going to put on the plinth. The ladder going. He's never going to get that up the ladder, is he? It's Ken Livingstone's henchmen are coming.
Where do you want to put it?
Put it on there.
You can't put it there, man.
But it's the greatest car ever.
Give you authorization.
Well, I mean, our audience, everybody voted for this as the greatest car ever.
If you don't get authorization,
but I mean, nobody voted for him there. This has been voted for.
You can't do it, man. You can't put it there.
But it would look majestic. And then you'd have Nelson there, and then him on the horse, and then you'd have the Land Rover. Well, not really.
No, you can't put it there. It's not allowed.
We're not going to get it.
He failed. He failed. We sent him down to put the Land Rover on the plinth. He didn't do it.
And